It's Hump Day. You know what that means. Time for the SCWA Hump Day book tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with our tech wizard, Diana Pardee. Every Wednesday at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook group over to a new author to introduce their work, their books, and maybe share a writing tip or two. So take a break, grab your coffee, and enjoy as the SCWA Hump Day Book Tour proudly presents New York Times bestselling author Janelle Brown. Janelle is the author of Pretty Things, Watch Me Disappear, All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, and This Is Where We Live. Her books have been sold in 2 countries around the world. Pretty Things, named a Best Book of 2020 by Amazon, is currently being adapted for television by Nicole Kidman's Blossom Films. Her journalism and essays have appeared in the New York Times, Vogue, Elle, Wired, Self, Real Simple, and the Los Angeles Times, and numerous other publications. Previously, she worked as a senior writer at Salon and began her career as a staff writer at Wired during the dot-com boom years, working on seminal websites like Hotwired and Wired News. In the 1990s, she was also the editor and co-founder of Maxi, an irreverent and now long gone women's pop culture webzine. A native of San Francisco and graduated of UC Berkeley, she has since defected to Los Angeles, where she lives with her husband, Greg, and their 2 children. Welcome, Janelle.
Hi, nice to be here.
Now we got over all that. So tell us all about the exciting things that are happening with Pretty Things.
Pretty Things. Well, here, this is Pretty Things. It came out on April 21st, which is smack dab in the first month of the pandemic, which was a very strange time to have a book come out. I mean, it's still a strange time, but the first couple of weeks in particular were craziness. You know, about a week, 3 weeks before my book came out, we were having conference calls about whether we should even postpone the book entirely, but we didn't. But so the book came out in April, and I was really worried that it was not a good time to have a book come out, but it's actually been a pretty fantastic experience. Different from my previous book launches, but Pretty Things has been, it's been a bestseller. People seem to love it. It's taken off in audio, which is really interesting and exciting, and I've never had that before. Yeah, audiobooks are like selling like crazy. I've been in the top 10 Amazon for the last 6 weeks. I think because people are listening to books in different ways, right? They're instead of reading hardbound books, they're doing a lot more ebooks, and they're doing a lot of audiobooks.
You have to credit the book because it's a great book, and it's fun to read. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the story?
Yes. So Pretty Things is a story of 2 women who are very, very different. One is an heiress of a West Coast fortune, very kind of old West Coast family, who has turned to becoming an Instagram influencer. So that's what she does with her life. And the other woman is a grifter, kind of a young con artist who targets women and men that she finds on social media and infiltrates their lives with plans to rip them off. So needless to say, the con artist targets the Instagram influencer, moves into her guest house in Lake Tahoe, along with her grifter boyfriend. And they befriend this woman and have, of course, nefarious intentions. But then everything goes very sideways, and it becomes a kind of psychological game of cat and mouse and revenge and all kinds of other themes, like about imagery and social media and the haves and the have-nots and things like that. So,
what was the most fun part of writing this book? I mean, you've written several other books, but what was the most fun about writing this book for you?
So, you know, each book I've written has been a little different. My first 2 books were All We Ever Wanted Was Everything and This Is Where We Live, were much more domestic drama in the Jonathan Franzen vein. So kind of funny, dark, about family dynamics and dysfunctional families and dysfunctional marriages. Then my 3rd book, Watch Me Disappear, was my first suspense novel, and it was a kind of a mystery. An unconventional mystery about a woman who goes for a hike and disappears and is presumed dead. And then a year later, her daughter and her husband start to suspect that she may not be dead after all. So those were the kind of books that I'd written before. And this book was a book about a con artist, which was a whole different kind of beast, right? It's also a suspense, but very different from the last book I wrote. And I had a blast writing it just because it was so different. I felt a kind of freedom in being able to like concoct this whole world that was so far from the world that I've ever written about before. The books I've written about before have been much more kind of grounded in domestic life in California, and this one was much more like let's get into like criminal activity, you know, let's get into con artists, and there was a kind of fun and freedom in that I really enjoyed, and writing characters who were doing things that I would never imagine doing myself.
So was there a risk in this at all for you, changing your approach and maybe your writing, and what prompted you to do something so different from your last book?
Well, I mean, yes, there's always a risk in doing something wildly different. And I did hit a point with this book where I was like, what am I doing? But that said, I like to do something a little different with each book, because otherwise I get bored. I want every book to be a new adventure for myself. But I do think that all my books are very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, even though some are suspense and some are domestic drama, they're all very much page turners. Well, a lot of stuff happens. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of lies. There's a lot of, you know, people trying to discern the truth about each other. So those are kind of common themes that go through all of my books, and I think tie them all together so that they feel kind of a piece, if that makes sense. Thematically and then style-wise, it's really just the story itself that starts to be different. It's not like, and I'm not writing a suspense novel that, you know, the Watch Me Disappear and Pretty Things have both been categorized as thrillers, and well, I do think they loosely can fall into that category, because I do think the thriller category has become much more of a catch-all for a lot of different kinds of books in the last few years. Both of the books, even though they're very different and they're both kind of thrillers, they both have a way of writing that is almost hard to categorize, if that makes sense. Like, they're heavy on character development, there's a lot of intrigue, and there's suspense, but it's much slower paced than I think your traditional thriller is. So I've forgotten what the point of what I was saying was.
Well, you know, I think I saw literary suspense.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really good description of
exactly.
the story.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of encapsulates a lot of different aspects of both Watch Me Disappear and Pretty Things. Like, you know, their literary suspense connotes that it's maybe a little slower paced than your average, you know, Harlan Coben novel. But not, Harlan Coben is amazing, by the way. I love him. But his stuff is very, very fast paced, and mine's a little bit more of a slow burn. So yeah.
So, you know, part of being a writing in a literary style or a literary work has a lot to do with characters and development and whatever. And you have three kind of really interesting characters in here. So I'm going to ask you the dreaded question that writers hate. So which character did you like writing the most? Did you like writing Nina or Vanessa or Lachlan?
Okay, Nina the grifter, I think had the most fun with initially, because she's a grifter, she's a con artist, and being able to try and get in the mind of someone like that, but also to make them empathetic at the same time and humanize, not just like a villainous con artist, but someone who's really interesting and complex, and you can understand their motivations for doing what they do. That was really fun, a really fun challenge as a writer. And then on the flip side, when I started getting into writing Vanessa, trying to take this, like, the cliche of the privileged heiress Instagram influencer who you think is going to be that deep, and give them depth, give her like an emotional journey that you're like, by the end, you're like, oh, actually I can understand her too. So I guess that's a non-answer. I love them both for different ways. Maybe Nina a little bit more, just because the fun of setting up a con artist at the beginning. And then of course Lachlan is, you know, He's just the charming, roguish bad guy. So, bad boy. So it was fun to write those.
So, of your characters, which one was the most difficult to write?
At first I think it was Lily, Nina's mom, who I knew was going to be a very significant character in the book, but it took me a long time to figure out who she was and what she was going to be. And I rewrote her from scratch a couple times, and it took me a while to figure out her story. And once I did, then it was really fast and really fun and really easy to write her, but it took me a couple iterations to get to her.
And because this has the elements of a con in it, did you find that you had to write this differently from a structural point of view? How did you approach writing this, and how was that different from your previous?
Right. Well, so this book is, not only does it have a con in it, but there are a couple major perspective shifts where you go into the POV of from Nina to Vanessa, and then to Nina, and then Vanessa, and then Nina again. And when you make those perspective shifts as a reader, suddenly a whole new world is revealed, right? And a new truth is revealed that changes, upends everything that you've read so far, which was really hard to write. And I had to figure out where tracking the withholding of information, where stuff was revealed, how it was revealed, that could still leave room for other things to be revealed later. I actually was going back and forth between Vanessa and Nina much more often. And I eventually realized that I needed to withhold for longer. And so I had to dial back the number of perspective shifts that I had and make them bigger chunks in one perspective before I moved to the next perspective. So that took a long time to figure out, and I had to do a lot more book maps than I normally do.
So obviously you're not one to back down from a writing challenge. So talk a little bit about doing the pilot or the adaptation and writing it yourself, because authors don't always get the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And whether you think knowing the characters as well as you do is helpful or limiting when you're doing this.
That's a good question. So I'm writing the pilot for Amazon and Nicole Kidman's production company, Blossom Films. Nicole's going to take a role. And I'm currently trying to tear the book apart and write a pilot. And it is, the upside is, you know your characters really well. And so it becomes easier to just create scenarios around them. Because part of writing a pilot is you're not just taking the book and translating it into the screen. You're taking the book and you're building the world bigger, because very few books are actually big enough to pull an entire season, right? 10 episodes, 12 episodes, whatever you're doing. So you do need to expand the world a little bit, right? So knowing your characters well allows you to expand that world as you're writing, and it's great. But it also means you have to let go of things too, because some things just are in the book and you need to just kill your darling and move on from something that you maybe feel very attached to. So it's kind of a, what you get with one hand, you take away with the other, if that makes sense. So it's a challenge.
So have you done this before? Is this something new for you?
I actually wrote a pilot adaptation of Watch Me Disappear, which is currently in development still. So, fingers crossed on that one as well. Hollywood. That's Hollywood for you. It takes forever.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now?
I'm working on a new novel that I don't like to talk about books when I'm in process on them, because I feel like the way my writing process is very loose, and I like to give myself room to learn as I'm writing and explore as I'm writing. And so if I talk about things too soon in the process, I feel like I'm almost putting a pin in something and pinning it down when I'm not ready to do that yet. Like, I don't want to say, oh, I'm writing a book about a mother and daughter that start robbing banks, and then suddenly everyone's expecting a book from me that I feel like I now need to write about a mother and daughter robbing banks. And then 75 pages into writing, decide, I don't think they should be robbing banks.
Exactly. Tune in for my next book when that happens.
Exactly.
So is the book that you're conceptualizing, is it in the same vein as Pretty Things, or is it more in the domestic suspense vein of your previous books?
I would say it's another literary suspense. There's a, a crime aspect to it, so you can call it a crime novel, much like my last two are crime novels. but it's all, again, different from the last four. I don't know. I feel like it would probably be classified as a literary suspense, though.
All right. And do you have any tips for writers out there that maybe in their dreams find themselves in your position where they are adapting a novel to streaming or TV, anything at all that you think might be helpful for them to know that you've learned that surprised you?
God, that's hard. I feel like maybe one of the things that I've learned that surprised me is how many more turns you need inside an hour of television than you would think. That something that happens on the page and you can kind of slowly draw out might actually only take, what takes 50 pages in a book might take 3 minutes in a pilot, because once you strip all the interior dialogue out, and so you need to have a lot more action and turns and shifts in what your character thinks and what they do, and actions that have reactions, and so there's a lot more adding that you need to do that I don't think a lot of writers who are starting this route really realize. I certainly didn't realize that at first, that like, oh, okay, I need to add a lot more to this than that was.
So your brain is in very good shape right now with all the thinking and everything that you've been doing.
Yes, well, trying to.
So
My brain's in good shape in general right now, but I'm doing what I can with what I have.
In the time of coronavirus. So can you tell us where people can find Pretty Things, and hold that beautiful cover up again one more time?
It's available pretty much everywhere, in your favorite independent bookstore. I know that all the great bookstores in Southern California have been selling them. Of course, it's available online. Audiobook is fantastic if you're interested in audiobooks.
And people can find out about you. Do you have a website?
I do, JanelleBrown.com. That's
okay. Very tricky. Yeah, love it. Love it. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being a guest today. Best of luck with everything that happens in the future.
Thank you.
We'll keep an eye out for your next book. Thank you. And everyone, if you enjoyed today's bookshot, please like and share. Again, if you can't afford to buy Janelle's books, I'm sure she appreciates reviews and sharing this program. So please feel free to do that. We will see you next Wednesday, August 12th, same time, same channel. Until then, take care, and we'll see you soon.